Good morning, everybody. Brian of London here in the forest in Tel Aviv. In that little bit between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is next week, when we all in the secular parts of Tel Aviv get out our bicycles and send our kids forth onto the multi-lane highways where they will ride their bikes. And some of us fast, some of us don't. Some of us think about the past year and what's going on. And the weather has started that slow turn here. It's not as hot. The humidity's backed off just a bit. Temperature's down. I was in Jerusalem yesterday. Had a very interesting meeting of something I'm working on. And to do with Western civilization, because that's the thing here. I think more than trying to defeat the evil empires that beset us and surround us, I'd rather build ours back up and just strengthen Western civilization. It's going through a decline, but I think there are actual tangible things that can be done to turn it around. With that in mind, also, yesterday, night before last, I watched the whole 1 hour or two, what was it? The 1 hour 40 version of Tommy's interview. And then I noticed that Ezra released an extended cut, which is over 2 hours, 10 minutes, of Tommy Robinson with just the full details that we haven't heard of his arrest, imprisonment, and everything about it. And overall impressions are, as usual with Tommy, he's such a straight shooter in these kinds of interviews, in that he's got all these stories and words that just fight to come out of him, and he can't get them out fast enough. And I know it's because of the way his brain is working. The way his brain is working there in the background, it is hard. He's got so much to say because what happened to him was monumental. I'll just pull out a few little details that I appreciate and noticed. He was all recalling this from memory. I watched a lot of the body language ladies' videos, and she points out certain ways that you can tell when someone's making the difference between someone making something up and someone recording from memory. And he's recording all of this from memory, but in the background, he's got documentary evidence. So each thing that he complained about, he's got a document. And you can say that he's a softie for some of these complaints, but the conditions under which he was kept are just unbelievable. In fact, yesterday I was with a guy, Daniel, hi Daniel, who served in the British Armed Forces in Afghanistan and Iraq and some other places. And we listened to part of Tommy's story on the way in the car on the way back, and his jaw was dropping because this was stuff they didn't do. Certainly the British Army didn't do to prisoners if they ever got them from the Taliban. This was more like what the Taliban did to prisoners they get. And I guess you'd expect this from ISIS. The problem comes with your expectations is that if the supposedly democratic government of Britain, one of the oldest democracies in history, is doing this to a subject, it is terrifying, because it's Stalin stuff, it's Gulag stuff, it's sending him down the punishment block because he's in danger of being killed, and then blaming him that he's being punished. The inability to recognize that he wouldn't have access to food because they refused to believe that other people that he might be suspicious of the content of his foods. They refused to believe that. So he's like not eating. I actually don't know how he has the self-control. I remember him being here in Israel. He was hungry all the time and he didn't like the food, but we had to find McDonald's everywhere. But the self-control that it takes not to eat because it might kill you. And then he said, and what he said was, he says, like, I didn't eat not just because he knew it might kill him, but because he didn't want to hand them a victory of easily killing him. I was left speechless. The tears of what his family go through. I just don't. At this point, having followed it for this long, I don't know how he does it. But correspondingly, the same thing that I said on the beach at the Dead Sea, I know that he's the only person in Britain who could have got this far doing this. Because the way he talks about being arrested and the way he talks about the differences in the way that they treated him, taking him to prison, taking him to Ellen Road police station in Leeds, but not putting him in the cells. It's like he knew something was different. This was not a normal arrest because this was court ordered. This is different from what happens when the Crown prosecution take you. And the fact that he's now being prosecuted, not by the Crown Prosecution Service, but by the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General's office is directly under the political control. Every single aspect of this stinks. The fact that you just don't know the charges against him. We don't know what is it in his video that he said wrong. What are they going to ask him? And yeah, someone says Tommy needs litigation against the state. Yeah, but how do you litigate against the state? Tommy's tried that. I mean, the fact that his appeal, which I think is in the extended video, is that he was denied the right to appeal what happened to him with his mortgage fraud case, where the government just stole £150,000 from him. This is a lot of money, $250,000 or so, or 115,000, something like a huge amount of money. So the government stole it from him. It is illegal that they took the money from him. He shouldn't have paid it, but it isn't a big enough miscarriage of justice. Yeah, of course, compared to the GDP of Great Britain, Tommy's 115 or 150 or whatever it is, £1,000, it's not a material thing. But for Tommy, and from just about everybody I know, over £100,000, over 130, 40, $50,000, that's a huge amount of money. But the state denies you the right to even go to court to get it back. So what do you think the chances are of suing the government for mistreatment in this case? And it's not just the government, it is the entire political and media elites, because they all uniformly backed against, they were all against Tommy. Every newspaper, every pundit, every broadcast, Channel 4, BBC, ITV, Sky News, every one of the major, they all ran hit pieces. They all ran hit pieces. Those of us who are out there countering the bullshit written by arseholes like Secret Barrister, or even, funnily enough, I ran into Melanie Phillips and her husband and said Shana Tova to them in Jerusalem yesterday. You know, Joshua Rosenberg actually was pretty decent, but even on his show, Radio 4 Law in Action, you know, a few weeks before his appeal, he has on the Lord Chief Justice basically saying Tommy's guilty of something. Guilty of what? I mean, affirming that it's correct to lock people up for talking on an iPhone outside of court, when, as far as, you know, anybody can tell, Britain has never jailed a journalist for contempt of court. The most that's ever happened is a fine, and those fines usually go to the entity that employs the journalist, not to the journalist personally. Tommy, what happened to Tommy is unprecedented. Now, Tommy's video and Rebel Media, and again, thank you to Ezra Levant for sticking with Tommy all the way through this. I mean, inspired. You know, I can count very few people who've taken a decision to support Tommy and stuck with it all the way. And I've never been disappointed with my decision, and I don't think Ezra is with his. And you know, he employed Tommy. Tommy's very unemployable. It's hard to employ Tommy. I can see that. I know that. But he's backing him to the hilt. That interview will go down as something very special, because just like, you know, there's a couple of videos of Tommy's now the video of Tommy speaking at the Oxford Union. There's the video that Tommy did somewhere up in the north, Newcastle or something, where he laid out the bits of government persecution that he wasn't allowed, literally was not allowed to say on pain of going back to prison at the Oxford Union speech. Because he did the Oxford Union speech while he was out on licence. So he'd been released early from his sentence. And he was constrained in the Oxford Union speech. Yeah, he was constrained in what he could say in that speech because somehow after a mortgage fraud conviction, the government has the right to restrict what you can say in public in Great Britain. Once Great Britain, as it shall forever be called. So in once Great Britain, after you serve a fictitious mortgage fraud crime, which nobody has ever been sent to prison for 18 months for, and which 30% of the country has made exaggerated claims on a mortgage application form, after you've served that sentence where you were railroaded into pleading guilty, otherwise your wife and kids would be put in danger, after you serve that sentence, the government can apparently, in once Great Britain, tell you what you can and can't say in public. You're okay with that, once Great Britain, people? I wouldn't be. No, I'm not. I left. Bye-bye. So his Oxford Union speech is amazing, and it still continues to get views. His speech sort of filling in the gaps of that, also amazing. That's another long one. And now this interview, especially the over 2 hours of it, let's just delve into that. Let's just delve into the length. If you want to create a lie, if you want to create a myth, if you want to tell, made up stories, you craft them carefully and you tell them as fast as possible and you make them as short and pithy as you can. What you don't do is sit and ramble for over 2 hours and then release an unedited tape where you bounce around and come back and go forwards. Because it's very hard to maintain lies like that. And just exactly as I said, when he came out of prison, he went into prison with basically nothing, zero, not even nothing, literally nothing, because they took everything away from him. He was wearing some clothes, they probably took those away. So he went into prison with nothing, not even a prison bag, which is what he was watching the defendants go into that court case with. And he came out with prison guards carrying huge duffel bags full of paper. My letters were in there. Everybody's letters were in there. Lots of us, everybody, I was telling everybody on every Periscope I did, I was putting a link to the email a prisoner system. I've still got some credit. I've got like 3 or 4 quid or whatever left over on email a prisoner. If anybody knows any other prisoners that need writing to, I'll write. That's all the paper he came out of prison with. So there were his notes of things he'd said to the prison and what they'd replied, and all the letters he sent to people. You can't construct, and if you do construct a lie or you try and deceive people, you do not do that in a 2-hour, 10-minute unedited video. Can't do it. I don't know of anybody who could maintain that kind of fiction without a team of writers. So that's, everything that happened to him, I would take as gospel what he said. Now, some of the stuff the details in that video are unbelievable. They literally, he said, why don't you, after he was moved from Hull, where he was relatively safe, and he wasn't safe because he was in general population in Hull, he was in the hospital. And what that meant was that for 2 hours a day, the staff in Hull took him out of his cell in the hospital part, and he fraternized not with the other prisoners, but with the prison staff. I dare say he might have been radicalizing the prison staff in HMP Hull. That is a fun thought. But that gave him human interaction, and he was relatively happy. And that was when the letter that he read, that I read out and other people read out, was written. Immediately they take him out of that, and they put him in this thing in Onley. And when he asks to go back to Hull, the reply is, we can't move you back to Hull because you're a racist for being asked to move to Hull, and we won't accede to your racism. I mean, it just staggers belief. When he asks for some extra money because he's because he's behaving well, so he can buy more cans of tuna or actually eat, they tell him, we don't know that whether you've been behaving well because you're not out in the prison population, you're locked in your cell all day, so we can't say that you're behaving well. If you go read Kafka. Well, don't read Kafka. Read Tommy's next book. It's going to be like Kafka. Read his first book. His first book is the same. It is these almost repetitive stories of what they did to him in prisons. And now he's got another one. I'll just channel ident. I'm Brian of London. I'm in Israel. I was from London. I am now in Israel, live here, have lived here for 10 years. I'm Israeli, formerly British. And the whole thing, you have to try and encourage people to watch that long video. I mean, it's a big commitment of time, but I started watching it and I didn't turn on TV. I don't watch TV these days. I watch YouTube. If I can watch things on BitChute or other platforms, I do. But if it has to be YouTube, I'll watch it on YouTube. But the point is, the material there. When you watch Tommy, that whole thing, the level of persecution, the sheer horror of what they did to him, the physical torture of denying him decent food, the mental torture of solitary confinement, of not having anyone to talk to, everything is just vile. Once Great Britain should be ashamed of itself. Politically, last thing I'll say here, I made a video, it was sort of tongue-in-cheek, saying he shouldn't be joining UKIP anyway. And listen, I honestly, unfortunately, with the British system, I don't see a political solution on the, Anne-Marie Waters, I like her party, but outside of Conservatives and Labour, even the Liberals have disappeared these days, it seems. There's almost no way there's no way to believe that anybody's going to politically take Britain back. I think agitating on the streets, I used to tell Tommy he should not go back to that. I don't like the big rallies, but you know what? Maybe it works. Honestly, at this point, I don't know how you get your country back. Somebody has to take control of the Conservative Party. I think that's more likely. It ain't going to be Tommy. Tommy's not going to be a political, sort of mainstream political thing anytime soon. But, oh my God, you can't live with a Theresa May and Javits and the Home Secretary. I mean, the justice system that did this to Tommy, not fit for purpose, as broken as the American one that persecutes the Trump people. So, anyway, those are my thoughts, long and tedious. Thank you for staying with me if you've watched this whole thing. Next time I come to you will be after Yom Kippur, before Sukkot. And big shout out to everybody. I'm Brian of London. I'm in the park in Tel Aviv. And see you the next time.